Imagine one of the most remote places on the entire planet. On this tiny island, nearly 1,000 silent stone giants stand watch. For centuries, these statues, the Moai of Rapa Nui or Easter Island, have been one of history's greatest puzzles. So that leads us to the big questions, right? Who on earth had the skill to create these things? What was the point? And how did they move statues weighing up to 80 tons across the island without any modern tech? To even begin to get our heads around the builders, you first have to understand just how incredibly isolated their home was. We're not just talking about another island. This place was quite literally a world unto itself.
Just let that number sink in. Over 3,500 kilometers of open ocean. That's how far Rapa Nui was from South America. That incredible distance meant that once people settled here, they were on their own for centuries, creating a culture that you just couldn't find anywhere else on Earth.
All right, so who were these incredible people who built a society in the middle of nowhere? Well, they weren't just some lost sailors who washed ashore. No, they were absolute masters of the sea. Our story really kicks off around the year 1200, right in the middle of the great age of Polynesian exploration. These weren't just explorers, they were some of the most skilled navigators in all of human history, and they were the ones who intentionally sailed out and settled this island. And get this, they arrived with this immense bank of knowledge. They used the stars, the ocean currents, even the flight patterns of birds to find this tiny speck of land. And what they found was a paradise, a volcanic island with rich soil and lush forests. It was everything they needed to build a complex, thriving society that would last for generations. Okay, so they've settled in, they're doing well. Why on earth did they decide to pour so much energy and so many resources into carving these colossal statues? What was driving them to do this? You see, the Moai were so much more than just art. They were seen as the living embodiment of their most powerful ancestors. Each statue, carved from the rock of a volcano, was believed to be a spiritual guardian, a protector that watched over its specific community. And this is where it gets really interesting, because this whole effort tells us everything about their society. The island was divided up into different clans, and they were all competing with each other. Building bigger and more impressive Moai was a way for each clan to honor its ancestors and, show off its power and prestige. And that, of course, brings us to the million-dollar question, the mystery that stumped everyone for centuries. How did they move these enormous statues, some weighing as much as a jumbo jet, across miles of rugged terrain with no wheels, no cranes, and no large animals? For the longest time, the only clue came from the Rapa Nui people themselves. And when early European visitors asked how they did it, the islanders' answer was simple: the Moai walked. Now, to an outsider, that just sounded like a myth, like pure legend. But here's the amazing part. It wasn't a legend at all. Modern experiments have shown it was an absolutely brilliant engineering technique. Teams would tie ropes to the statue's head, and by pulling back and forth in a rhythm, they could rock it from side to side, shuffling it forward. It literally walked. It's kind of like how you might rock a heavy refrigerator to move it across the floor. Just pure genius. Now, this is where the story usually takes a pretty dark turn. The classic tale you've probably heard is one of self-destruction and collapse. But what if that story isn't the whole picture? Well, new evidence is telling a very different and much more complicated story. So what we're seeing is this huge shift in thinking. The old popular story was simple. They got obsessed with statues, chopped down all their trees to move them, and destroyed your own society. A simple cautionary tale. But the new evidence paints a picture of a people who faced incredible environmental challenges and adapted with remarkable ingenuity. Look, deforestation and conflict were definitely part of the equation, no doubt about it. But they weren't the knockout punch. The real devastation came from the outside. The arrival of Europeans brought diseases the islanders had no immunity to, and brutal slave raids decimated the population, wiping out huge parts of their culture and knowledge. And yet, despite everything, all that hardship, the spirit of the Rapa Nui is still there. Their descendants are on the island today, working to preserve their language and their incredible heritage. And the Moai still stand, not looking out to sea like you'd expect, but gazing inland, forever watching over the communities that created them.
When you really think about it, what the builders of Rapa Nui did was just incredible. In one of the most isolated spots on the planet, they turned volcanic rock into a timeless monument to their ancestors, their community, and their spirit. In their hands, stone literally became memory.
And that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? The story of Rapa Nui shows just how dangerous it is to settle for simple explanations of the past. It really makes you wonder how many other stories of so-called collapsed civilizations aren't really tales of failure, but are actually complex chronicles of incredible human resilience.